The plot only thickens as the deadline approaches here on Locked On Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and today we are here with Nick Zararis, also host of Locked On Flames. Nick, how you doing?
It's Monday. We're fighting it a little bit, but we're doing all right.
Yes, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It would not be the trade deadline countdown if there wasn't drama or several storylines surrounding each organization. So we are going to talk all about Saturday's incredible win against the Penguins and the latest on Markstrom and ownership. Just kind of, are they getting in the team's way? And more on today's episode. But make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well, because we're here for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, your team every day. It was a nice ceremony on Saturday.
That's always the big thing, man. Especially for somebody like Kipper, who, I forget who said it. Elliot might have said it on 32 Thoughts today, or someone might have said it over the weekend, but the idea of having a ceremony for a guy that, like, people don't know that well, like, part of Kiprusoff's, like, charm is that, like, people don't know him all that well. Like, being aloof was, like, kind of part of his gimmick in a way, that being distant and being kind of hard to reach, like the joke about how Jamie McLennan, who's the one who called him to kind of facilitate this, he's like, "I'll call you back, Jamie. I'm in a tree right now." And that was the end of the conversation. Like, stuff like that. It's interesting to have a ceremony for a guy people don't know all that well. Like, you think about some of the ones around the league, like you think about Jágr's, you know, everybody, Jágr was around forever, and Jágr wasn't that out there with his life, but we all kind of knew some stories, especially when he was younger and in Pittsburgh. Kipper, you know, there's like 5 or 6 stories from his teammates. Like, the Backlund one was pretty funny. The anecdote about them going out drinking when Backlund was a rookie, that was pretty funny. But, like, it's really interesting that they did it for someone who deservedly so, by the way, not someone they know all that well. Like, for us as fans, that's what I crave from the team content. Like, I don't care what their favorite movie is. I want to know why that's their favorite movie. The type of stuff where I get to know them. And this is a good little glance into who he is.
Yeah, and I feel like things like this shouldn't just happen after a player's career ends. I think it's that human element that a lot of people crave from their favorite teams and their players. Like, I want to hear his thoughts on, you know, how did he come up with the idea of setting his equipment up around his stall so the media wouldn't get too close? And he didn't really pretend to speak. He pretended not to know English too well. Like, how did you come up with that?
That's a great gimmick. I always find that very amusing, especially when there are guys we know they speak English, but they just don't. They pretend not to, so they don't have to do it. I always find that amusing. What you were just talking about, it was Mike Commodore who said that Kiprusoff, he didn't know Kiprusoff even spoke English, but they were at practice one day, and he goes, just unprompted, "Your hair's too long. I can't see." And he turned around, he's like, "You speak English?" Just like totally shocked because he hadn't heard it. Like, stuff like that is why sports are cool. You like learning about these guys. It makes them more endearing. It makes you want to go to battle for them. 2004 is a really long time ago for a lot of us. I was in second grade in 2004. Like, I remember that Stanley Cup final being on my television, but I do not remember anything from that Stanley Cup final, and I have a good memory, and that's me saying that. So Moments like that are important. They're good for the community. They're good for the fan base. And I know teams generally do them when the team is bad as like a ploy to get people in the door. Like there's a reason the Blackhawks finally retired Chris Chelios' number a few weeks ago, because they're god awful and they need to get people in the door. And the Flames finally doing it this year should have been an indicator that they didn't have high expectations for this season. But I'm glad it finally happened.
Absolutely. And I think that, any sort of ceremony like this is it's monumental. Like there's parents who, were probably like in their early teens, 20s and watched that Stanley Cup final. And now they have maybe small Flames fans of their own and can say, hey, when I was your age, I saw Kipper do this. And it's great to just, appreciate and make memories out of.
It really is about the little things at times, man. We were talking about this from the concept of this season. Some of these games, the last month, have been very fun. Mm-hmm. You might remember the Kadri goal against Letang, and we'll actually talk about the game at some point, I promise. But you'll remember individual things like that. But this season at large, other than the trades, going to get lost to history to a lot of degree. There aren't a lot of moments that particularly stand out. But people will remember Kiprusoff finally got his number retired. They'll remember the Flames were down in the game and they came back to win. And the rest of that sentence will be finished by how the next couple of years of Flames hockey go. And it really started to feel like they moved into the next era of what their team was going to look like type deal.
Yeah, like just a chapter of a book closing. And I mean, the game itself was not very entertaining, I would say, mainly because you had Jacob Markstrom leave his crease in the first 5 minutes, and that's when I knew we were kind of potentially cooked. But once he got settled in, it was kind of nice, and then the Flames found their footing, and yeah, I thought it was a good game. The third period made for a good game.
It was very entertaining. I had a lot of fun. I was at the Islander game. I caught the end of the Flames game. I had an entertaining time. And I said this a few weeks ago, and I'll say it again. Buildings jammed. You couldn't have got another person in there with a crowbar. It was loud. You started to get the crowd back into the game as they started chipping away. The crowd goes nuclear on the Kadri goal. And then to come back and win the game. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago, the idea that no matter what happens on a night-to-night basis as a Flames fan, you're winning. Mm-hmm. Games like Saturday are a lot of fun. There are no consequences. You won the game. You may or may not have signed the death warrant for the Sidney Crosby Penguins along the way. We talked about the idea of the Penguins being the biggest haters and ruining, the Flames being the NHL's biggest haters and ruining team seasons the rest of the way. That's the mold. What you did on Saturday is the goal every single time you go out on the ice. Screw the Penguins. I don't care. I don't care who Sidney Crosby is. We're here to ruin their night. That's got to be the MO the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they'll ruin the Kraken's night tonight, and we will see several of them on their way out in the coming days. But any more thoughts on the game or Saturday in general?
Every now and then you get reminded why you love sports. Like I was saying before, that game at large doesn't matter a whole lot, but I'll remember that Kadri goal. I will remember that Kadri goal, and that's what it's about. In a long season with not grand aspirations, it is about those little moments. It is about Kipper finally getting his moment. It is about, hey, the Flames might not be great right now, but guys like Kadri, guys like Huberdeau, guys like Rasmus Anderson, those guys are going to be here through the transition, so it won't get Chicago bad. It won't get Anaheim bad.
No. And that's really something to hold on to because, they're very much in the trenches. But coming up next, we are going to talk about the Flames organization just burning their own bridges with their own players. And we will do that right after this. But first, a word from our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Nick, are you going to be placing any bets this evening?
Tonight, I'll see what the late games are looking like. I'll see what the 10 o'clock window is looking like. I still got to go to the gym tonight, so we'll definitely do something because work's to be done, so hockey will be on, so I will definitely be opening the FanDuel app.
Absolutely. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA and NHL teams and players with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode, and stick around for the chaos that ensues over these next 5 days and then into the off season, of course. We talked on Friday about Markstrom's comments about how he felt like things could have been handled better.
Yes.
Then, they have Kipper's retirement ceremony and all that, and try not to take too much spotlight off of that. And then today we find out that it was Don Maloney that kind of put his foot down and said, no, we're not trading him. The deal with the Devils was pretty much good to go, apparently.
So you and I have emphasized this a lot. You have to think about where the information is coming from. It's coming from Frank. It's coming from Daily Faceoff. They are not batting 1,000 in their accuracy. Every now and then, they will get things right, and they will get some things wrong. They are not on the same tier, in my opinion, of reliability as Elliott and Jeff, as Chris Johnston. Right. They're not on that tier of mainstream legacy news media where they have, they have higher ups they're accountable to. And that's not a knock on independent media. Independent media is important. It's good. But there aren't as severe of consequences if they get it wrong, as opposed to if Jeff, Elliott, Chris Johnston, etc. get it wrong. This is perfectly believable. If you told me this is what happened, I'd believe it. It would make sense. It would add up, especially based on the context of Markstrom being kind of pissed about it. Because if you believe this story, the way it's been framed, Markstrom probably told his wife, hey, I'm probably getting traded. We're probably going to New Jersey. It's going to happen soon. We got to prepare. We got to figure out what we're going to do. If you guys are going to come with me, if you guys are going to stay here, we're going to have to figure out visa stuff to move to the States. Like, it's a lot of moving parts. And then for it to get pulled back on, he has a right to be upset if that's what happened. I understand. Even if that's not what happened, I understand that originally he said he didn't want to be traded to begin with. Mm-hmm. They went out of their way and asked him. He changed his mind to accommodate them, and then they went back on it again. So either way, the Flames are kind of in the wrong here with how they've handled this Markstrom situation.
Definitely. And I saw someone make a really good point that I didn't see really anyone else talking about, but that information getting out there also kind of gives Conroy a little bit of leeway, because if he doesn't do something great or lavish, ownership wouldn't let him do it. They didn't let Brad Treliving do his job, so why are they going to give the new guy an opportunity to really do it? And that might not be the case at all.
The one thing I'll say about that, and I'll add on to it, ownership makes itself known in stories like this when it feels like they need to be known that it was them. If it was just a Don Maloney decision, okay. But on behalf of ownership tells you that the ownership is put it like this. That detail is there because someone wants it to be there. And again, we don't know this is actually what happened. This is only one source that is saying this happened. And generally when it comes to stories like this, if something happened, you will hear it from multiple places because multiple people will have heard about it. And that's really where I come down on this. It's perfectly believable. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Right.
I am saying I don't know for sure it happened. So I would say take it with a grain of salt.
I think that's completely fair. I mean, and we talk about it so much. And like we just talked about a few minutes ago, consider the source. And how often do people just dunk on Frank Seravalli for just the things he's hearing are things that have already been tweeted out by the official accounts. Like you got the same tweet notification.
Sources say source at New Jersey Devils.
Yeah. Like
that's how
all
you
of
know.
us are insiders then.
That is how you know something is news versus it's speculation or a favor. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, if news breaks, everybody tweets about it within a 5-minute window because the email or the text about the information went out. The Devils announced the firing of Lindy Ruff. It was not reported by anyone because no one knew. They all said sources or blah, 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 5 to 10 minutes after the Devils announcement. Being that no other reporter from any other publication has also echoed that this was an ownership through Maloney thing, I am going to say maybe it happened, but I don't know. And that's generally how you should approach reporting, especially in the sports vacuum where there's only a handful of people. Being that there are so few people who are tapped in, if they all get it at the same time, it's happening or it already happened.
Yeah. And we talk about it a lot. What we're hearing is like we're hearing it for a reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, could that just be something to stir the pot? Did something like is there some sort of truth in that? There could be. I mean, Markstrom didn't get traded, so somebody could have said, "Oh no, he waived his no movement clause," or he didn't want to move it. He just made something up, and that's very well what could have happened here.
I don't think he just straight up made it up. I think someone told him this and he probably doesn't have a means of verifying it, but he still reported it anyway. Because that's the thing. A lot of people hear things, you know.
Yeah.
We're relatively plugged in people. We are adjacent to media people. I hear things all the time about transactions and rumors. I have no means of verifying them, so I don't say them. That's the golden rule in journalism is 2 sources. A lot of the stuff that gets reported in sports media does not have 2 sources. It is this was texted to me by someone, or this was in my group chat, or this was in an email. And the people who just say, I'm hearing, well, where are you hearing it? That's the thing I would say, man. That's the thing I would say.
Yeah. And this is a great media literacy podcast as well as your daily hockey coverage because it's so important to remember where everything is coming from. And like, it's even harder now on Twitter because not everyone has the verified badge anymore, or you can just buy the badge and impersonate whoever you want. So I would just recommend turning on notifications for those, trusted sources that we mentioned, because
at least through Friday, that should be go Elliot, Jeff, Kevin Weeks, whoever tickles your fancy, go put their notifications on through 3:00 on Friday. You could turn them off after the deadline and you put them back on a week before the draft, right after the Stanley Cup final, put them back on. That's how you should go about doing this in this environment right now. Reading all the stuff, believe me, I have read every single one of the godforsaken trade columns in every publication because my job is to know what's going on. I have an idea of what people think, but I don't know if that's what they know.
No. And there's no way to know until it hits that central registry, and then we all get the 65 tweets from everyone that is also hearing this. But coming up next, we're going to wrap up the show with some more Flames talk and just where things kind of stand right now on March 4th. But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break here and talk to you about Game Time. I love Game Time because I can go to games at the very last minute at a very low price, and it's great because they have last minute ticket deals, flash deals, and zone deals with killer last minute deals, all in pricing and view from your seats, and Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They're obsessed with finding ways to help save you money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It is the place to find last-minute seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Times will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into today's episode. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at JustBelmosto and at Nixed. The plot thickens. What is the plot?
I like how apparently Noah Hanifin's just getting to pick his landing spot. Like, again, we talked about this last week in regards to Tanev. It's great you want to do right by these guys. The Tampa Bay Lightning have two pennies to rub together as far as assets. There is not a single prospect in that system that remotely intrigues me. I'm pulling up their cap friendly right now. They don't have a first or a second this year, and they don't have a first next year.
So what are you doing?
It's a great question. If I knew, I'd tell you. Like, in an ideal world, if they're trading Noah Hanifin, send them to Florida, get Lindell back, the center who doesn't really have a spot in their organization. Trade with the Devils and get Holtz or Mercer. Trade him for a player. If you trade with Tampa Bay, you are going to get the mystery box. Anything could be in the mystery box, even Noah Hanifin. That's why I don't like these mystery box trades. It's why I didn't like the trade with the Stars for Tanev. It's why, even though they got a good quantity of assets for Lindholm, I didn't love the return. It was fine. If you trade Hanifin to Tampa Bay, you are more likely than not going to get a box of crap in return. You are going to get guys you are going to have to develop, or you're going to get mediocre draft picks. And Tampa Bay is not going to be picking, that high in any of the later rounds, Like, they have a second, that's great. That's going to be pick 58. That has like a 5 to 10% chance of becoming an NHL player. That's great. It looks good on your balance sheet when you've got all of these extra picks, but eventually they have to become something. If they trade Hanifin to Tampa Bay, they need to get something good, not just like picks or prospects. They need to get somebody actively good in return. The issue with that is Tampa Bay is going for it. Not that convincingly, but they're not going for it. So they're not going to give you anybody good off their roster. We talked about, could we maybe do something with the Bruins? Yeah, there's probably a Jake DeBrusk centered package for Noah Hanifin. Yeah. But you still got to give DeBrusk an extension. Making a hockey trade for Noah Hanifin is going to be difficult, but you can't just send them to where he wants to go, especially if it's Tampa, because they don't have anything.
No, and I understand that he does have like a little bit of, I believe leverage. He has a leverage. Yeah. So like, I understand, but send him to the other team that is in Florida. If he is
list, he cannot be traded to. So
and I'm
there's
sure
24 other teams.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, just go off of the teams that aren't on that list. It's not like it's a 16 team list. It is 8.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of those teams are Canadian teams and probably Anaheim. I'm just guessing. I don't know. But just do it. You don't have to do right by him. And when you talk about bringing, a Jake DeBrusk trade, he's 25, 26, and he's going to want money. He's going to want way more. He has 2 points. I'm pretty sure Jacob Markstrom has more points than him in the last 20 games.
It's not a great stat for a forward. You don't want to be outscored by a goalie. Not a great stat.
No. So, Florida, to me, feels like the right pick. And if he's concerned about income tax, great. The Florida Panthers you don't have to worry about that there either.
Florida, the Panthers and the Devils are the two teams I would be highlighting for a Hanifin trade. The Panthers signed a lot of defensemen to one-year deals in the offseason because they didn't know what their defense was going to look like coming into the year because both Montour and Ekblad were hurt during the Cup final run last year, missed the start of the season. They were back relatively early, but, guys like Nico Mikkola, Alvin Ekman-Larsson, they let Mark Stahl leave. They are a team, and they have roster players who would be intriguing for me as well. So I hope that's only out there as just kind of a moving the story along type reporting that we've come to see a lot of over the last few weeks. But yeah, nothing Tampa Bay has really entices me at all. That would not be a good feel for the Flames, especially based on how the Tanev trade went, where pretty much everybody on paper didn't really like it. And
yeah,
I know Ishikov, or I forgot how to pronounce the kid's name, had an okay debut for the AHL team last week, but we're talking about somebody who's probably 2 years away from playing at the NHL level. That's not the most encouraging type of... It's not the most encouraging. Yeah. Grushnikov, excuse me, not Ishnikov. Ishnikov's an Islanders prospect, but that's what I mean here. It's great you're getting all these picks, all these assets. Eventually, you need guys. You can only kick the can for so long. And I know people will say, well, they're winning games, can't they make something happen? Even if they make the playoffs this year, sure. They still need to be worried about the future. The goal is to win a Stanley Cup.
Right. It's not just 2 home games in the first round.
Yes.
And that's not $4 million. Woohoo. What? It's pointless. But if they make the playoffs, great. That is an added bonus to a tumultuous season. And to more to your point about moving the story along, we sat for weeks, months, it felt like, with no decision from Noah Hanifin. I feel like Thanksgiving, Christmas, you went back, you spent time with his family, then the All-Star break happens, and then we finally have some sort of idea, maybe, and then it's just okay, we're playing catch up with all of these stories. And I don't like it.
It's frustrating, man. And we can wrap up on this. Sports media is unequipped to cover anything that's not transaction news because transaction news is the sugar rush. It's the easiest thing. You don't even have to have sources. You can just tweet into the void, this is possible, and you'll still get interactions. And that's why trade rumors are easily the most bankable thing you can do for content. And it's why they dominate the storylines. That's not to say they're good at reporting transactions. As I said, the Devils fired Lindy Ruff. Every single reporter tweeted their own Devils and Lindy Ruff part ways or Devils fire Lindy Ruff 7 to 8 minutes after the transaction was announced. They don't know. So don't take the reports, the rankings lists of who's likely to be traded, all that. That's great. These people are told the information they are told to help other people. It is not to benefit the reporter. If anything, it benefits the team more to misinform the person.
Yeah. And I mean, last week we talked about Chris Tanev being traded and how that was taking forever. And then he was traded 20 minutes after we finished recording. So if the Flames could hold off until like tomorrow morning, that would be fantastic. Just sit him tonight. He's got a stomach bug, trade related reasons. Just do something. But we will be back tomorrow with the latest news and updates on your Calgary Flames. And you're going to want to stick around and make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts and on YouTube as well. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Sararis. And Nick, do you have any parting words for us today?
Check your sources.